The emergency alarm pierced through the quiet campus at midnight. While students panicked and ran, Marcus watched in shock as the elderly night guard he'd always dismissed transformed before his eyes, moving with military precision, speaking in code, and coordinating a response that no ordinary security guard should know how to handle. If you enjoy stories about hidden heroes and unexpected revelations that change everything, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to help more people discover these incredible tales of courage. Hiding in plain sight, Marcus Chen pulled his hood up against the October wind as he hurried across the empty quad of Riverside University. At 19, he thought he knew everything about his campus. Every shortcut, every hiding spot, every staff member who might give him trouble for being out after midnight. The brick pathways were slick with fallen leaves, and the old-fashioned lampposts cast long shadows between the academic buildings. That he was cutting through the main courtyard when he first heard it. A low, persistent beeping coming from the security office in the administration building. Marcus paused, curiosity overriding his desire to get back to his dorm undetected. The sound was different from the usual campus noises he was accustomed to. Through the large windows of the security office, Marcus could see a figure hunched over what appeared to be multiple screens. It had to be Pete, the night security guard everyone called Quiet Pete, because he rarely spoke more than a few words to anyone. Pete was probably in his 60s, with grey hair and a slight limp that made his rounds take longer than they should. Most students barely noticed him. Marcus had always assumed Pete was just another aging security guard counting down the days to retirement. The man seemed to struggle with the newer electronic systems the university had installed, often requiring help from students to operate the computerized entry systems. He drove the same beaten-up Honda Civic to work every night, and brought his dinner in a brown paper bag. The beeping intensified, and Marcus noticed something strange. Through the window, he could see Pete working with what looked like multiple radio units, not just the standard campus security radio. The old man's movements were quick and purposeful, completely different from his usual slow, careful demeanor during normal security rounds. Marcus crept closer to the building, staying in the shadows of the oak trees that lined the walkway. From this vantage point, he could see Pete more clearly. The security guard was wearing headphones and appeared to be taking notes in a small notebook. Every few seconds, he would adjust dials on equipment that definitely didn't look like standard campus security gear. The scene struck Marcus as odd enough that he pulled out his phone to record what he was seeing. Maybe Pete was violating some kind of policy, or perhaps the old man was up to something he shouldn't be. Marcus had heard stories of security guards using campus equipment for personal purposes, and this might be his chance to catch someone in the ACT. Marcus watched. Pete suddenly stood up from his chair with a speed that seemed impossible for someone who usually moved so slowly during his daily rounds. The old man began gathering papers from his desk, his movements sharp and efficient. Then Pete did something that made Marcus's blood run cold. He began speaking into one of the radios in what sounded like military jargon. "Control, this is Nightwatch 7. Code Yellow initiated. Requesting immediate backup at grid reference Delta 4. Timestamp 0047 hours. Awaiting confirmation for Protocol Bravo." Marcus pressed himself against the tree trunk, his heart racing. Those weren't the words of a simple campus security guard. The precise terminology, the coordinated timing, the professional radio protocol, it all pointed to something far more sophisticated than routine campus security. The response came through the radio clearly enough for Marcus to hear from his hiding spot. "Nightwatch 7, this is Control. Backup en route. ETA 4 minutes. Maintain position and prepare for code red escalation if necessary." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. Code red? Backup? What kind of situation required that level of response on a quiet college campus at midnight? He watched as Pete moved to a filing cabinet and retrieved what appeared to be a weapon. Though from Marcus's distance, he couldn't be certain what type. The old security guard then did something that defied everything Marcus thought he knew about him. Pete moved to the window and began scanning the campus with professional efficiency, his eyes methodical and alert in a way that spoke of extensive training. This wasn't the confused elderly man who needed help with the electronic door systems. Marcus realized he was witnessing something far beyond a simple security matter. The equipment in Pete's office, the military-style communications, the coordinated response, it all suggested that the campus security position was a cover for something else entirely. The emergency alarm that had been beeping suddenly changed pitch, becoming a sharp, urgent wail that echoed across the campus. Within seconds, Marcus saw students begin emerging from dormitories, many in pajamas and robes, looking confused and frightened by the midnight alarm. But Pete's response was anything but confused. He immediately activated additional radio frequencies and began coordinating with multiple parties. All units, this is Nightwatch 7. Evacuation Protocol Charlie is now in effect. Repeat, Evacuation Protocol Charlie. All civilians to gather at designated safe zones. Marcus watched in amazement as Pete's voice carried across the campus through speakers he didn't even know existed. The man's accent had completely changed, the broken English and uncertain demeanor replaced by crisp, authoritative commands that students and staff immediately began following. Emergency vehicles began arriving on campus with impossible speed, as if they had been waiting nearby. Fire trucks, ambulances, and several unmarked black vehicles with government plates pulled up to strategic positions around the campus perimeter. Marcus realized this wasn't a drill or a random emergency. This was a coordinated operation. Through his phone camera, Marcus continued recording as Pete emerged from the security office. The transformation was complete and startling. Gone was the slow, limping gait. Instead, Pete moved with military bearing, his posture straight and his movements efficient. He carried equipment that Marcus had never seen before, and he wore what appeared to be body armor under his security jacket. Pete began directing the emergency responders with hand signals and radio communications that were clearly military in nature. Marcus watched as firefighters and paramedics deferred to Pete's authority without question, suggesting they knew exactly who he was and why he was in charge. Perimeter secure, came a voice through Pete's radio. Package contained. Threat level downgraded to yellow. Package? Threat level? Marcus's mind raced as he tried to process what he was witnessing. This was no ordinary campus emergency, and Pete was no ordinary security guard. The old man who struggled with electronic door locks was coordinating a multi-agency response with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. As the immediate crisis seemed to stabilize, Marcus made a decision that would change his understanding of everything. He stepped out from behind the tree and approached Pete directly. The security guard noticed him immediately, his hand moving instinctively to his radio. "Student, you need to return to the designated safe zone immediately," Pete said, his voice carrying an authority that Marcus had never heard from him before. "Pete," Marcus said, his voice uncertain. "What's happening? What is all this?" For a moment, Pete studied Marcus's face, as if calculating how much information to reveal. The old man's eyes, which had always seemed tired and unfocused during normal campus interactions, were now sharp and alert. "There was a security concern," Pete replied carefully. "Everything is under control now. But the radios, the equipment, the way you're talking, this isn't normal campus security," Marcus pressed. "Who are you really?" Pete glanced around at the ongoing operation, then back at Marcus. For the first time since the emergency began, he seemed to hesitate. "Sometimes people aren't what they appear to be," he said finally. "Are you some kind of agent?" Marcus asked directly. Pete's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught something in his eyes. Not denial, but a careful consideration of how much truth to reveal. "I'm someone who takes security very seriously," Pete answered. As they spoke, one of the emergency responders approached them. "Sir," the man said to Pete, "the package has been safely removed. No contamination detected. The all clear can be given." Marcus noticed that the responder had addressed Pete as Sir, with unmistakable deference. This wasn't how people typically spoke to campus security guards. "Thank you, Agent Morrison," Pete replied. "Initiate Code Green and begin civilian return protocols." "Agent Morrison?" Marcus's mind reeled. He looked around the campus with new eyes, noticing details he had missed before. The unmarked vehicles weren't just emergency responders. They were positioned at strategic points that would control all access to and from the campus. The operation was military in its precision and scope. "Pete," Marcus said quietly, "what really happened here tonight?" The older man looked at him for a long moment before responding. "What happened here, Marcus, is that a potential threat to this campus and its students was identified and neutralized before anyone got hurt." "How do you know my name?" Marcus asked, suddenly realizing that Pete had never shown any indication of knowing individual students before. "I know all of your names," Pete replied simply. "It's my job to know." As the emergency vehicles began to depart and students started returning to their dormitories, Pete's radio crackled one final time. "Nightwatch 7, this is Control. Operation successful. Resume standard cover protocols. Well done. Pete acknowledged the transmission and began removing his tactical equipment, transforming back into the simple campus security guard that everyone expected to see. But Marcus had witnessed the transformation, and there was no going back to seeing Pete as just an ordinary old man. The equipment, the training, the way everyone deferred to you. You're not really a security guard, are you? Marcus asked. Pete paused in his preparations to return to normal campus security mode. I am exactly what I appear to be, he said carefully. A man whose job is to keep students safe. But you're something else too, Marcus insisted. Pete looked at him with what might have been respect. Everyone is something else too, Marcus. The question is whether those other aspects serve a purpose worth maintaining. As Pete began his regular security rounds, moving once again with the slow, careful gait that students expected, Marcus realized he had been given a glimpse into a world that existed parallel to his normal college experience. The campus he thought he knew was apparently under protection by people whose true capabilities were hidden in plain sight. The next morning, campus life returned to normal. The emergency was explained away as a gas leak in one of the science buildings that had been quickly contained. Students grumbled about the midnight evacuation and the lost sleep, but within a few days, the incident was largely forgotten. But Marcus couldn't forget. He found himself paying attention to Pete in ways he never had before. During the day, the security guard resumed his familiar pattern of slow rounds and struggles with technology. Yet Marcus now noticed subtle details that had escaped his attention previously. Pete's path during security rounds followed patterns that provided optimal visibility of all campus entrances. His radio was always positioned for quick access, and his keys were organized with military precision. Most tellingly, Pete's eyes never stopped moving, constantly scanning for potential threats that other people wouldn't even think to look for. Marcus also began noticing that Pete seemed to anticipate problems before they occurred. When a group of non-students attempted to enter the campus late one evening, Pete was already moving toward their location before they became visible from his usual position. When a student had a medical emergency near the library, Pete arrived with first aid supplies before the call even went out over the regular campus emergency system. The more Marcus observed, the more questions he had. Who was Pete really? What kind of training had he received? What other emergencies had he handled that students never knew about? The campus security position was clearly a cover, but for what kind of operation? 3 weeks after the midnight emergency, Marcus decided to approach Pete directly. He found the security guard in his usual spot near the student center, apparently struggling with a new electronic access panel that had been installed. Need help with that, Pete? Marcus offered. Pete looked up, and for just a moment, Marcus saw a flicker of amusement in the old man's eyes. These new systems are complicated, Pete replied in his usual hesitant manner. Pete, Marcus said quietly, I know what I saw that night. The real question is why someone with your skills is working as a campus security guard. Pete's hands stilled on the access panel. He studied Marcus for a long moment before speaking. What do you think you saw, son? I saw someone who moves like a soldier, talks like an agent, and coordinates emergency responses like someone who's done it professionally for years, Marcus replied. I saw someone pretending to be confused by simple technology while operating sophisticated communications equipment. Pete nodded slowly. And what conclusion have you drawn from these observations? That you're here for a reason that has nothing to do with checking student IDs and making sure doors are locked, Marcus said. Pete finished adjusting the access panel, with movements far more confident than his usual fumbling, and turned to face Marcus fully. Sometimes, Marcus, the most important work happens where people least expect it. A university campus might seem like an unlikely place for serious security concerns, but think about what happens here. Marcus frowned, not immediately understanding. Research, Pete continued. Cutting-edge technology development. International students from sensitive regions. Faculty with government connections. Defense contracts. A campus like this isn't just an educational institution. It's a potential target. The explanation hit Marcus like a revelation. Of course, universities were centers of innovation and international exchange, making them attractive to foreign intelligence services and other threat actors. Pete wasn't just a security guard. He was protecting assets and people that most students never realized were valuable or vulnerable. So you're what, undercover FBI? Marcus asked. Pete smiled slightly. I'm someone who makes sure that students like you can focus on your studies without worrying about threats you don't even know exist. How long have you been here? Marcus pressed. 15 years, Pete replied. Long enough to see multiple generations of students graduate safely. Marcus thought about all the times he had dismissed Pete as irrelevant. All the occasions when he and other students had treated the old security guard as invisible or incompetent. The irony was overwhelming. The person they had ignored was the one ensuring their safety every single day. That night with the emergency, Marcus said. What really happened? Pete hesitated before answering. Someone attempted to place a device in one of the research buildings. A device that could have caused significant harm to people and property. We were able to intercept and neutralize the threat before any damage occurred. We. Marcus caught the plural pronoun. Campus security works closely with local and federal authorities when necessary. Pete replied diplomatically. Marcus realized he was getting as much truth as Pete was authorized to share. The details of the operation, the nature of the threat, and Pete's exact role would remain classified. But the conversation had revealed enough to fundamentally change Marcus's understanding of his campus environment. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked. Pete considered the question carefully. Because you notice things that others missed. Because you ask the right questions. And because sometimes it's important for people to understand that safety requires vigilance, even when that vigilance is invisible. As they talked, other students passed by, greeting Pete with casual waves or completely ignoring him. None of them suspected they were walking past someone whose presence was the difference between their campus being a safe place to learn and being a potential target for those who would do them harm. Will you keep doing this job? Marcus asked. As long as it's necessary, Pete replied. As long as there are students who need protection and threats that need to be monitored. Marcus looked around the campus with new appreciation. The familiar buildings, walkways, and gathering spots now seemed different, knowing they were under the protection of someone far more capable than anyone realized. Pete, Marcus said finally, thank you. For keeping us safe, even when we didn't know we needed it. The old security guard nodded simply. That's what good security should be, Marcus. Effective, but invisible. Present, but unnoticed. Successful, but unrecognized. As Marcus walked back to his dormitory, he reflected on the lesson he had learned. The campus was full of people whose true capabilities and purposes were hidden beneath surface appearances. The janitor might be a former engineer. The cafeteria worker might speak 5 languages. The quiet security guard might be a highly trained operative keeping everyone safe. From that night forward, Marcus made a point of acknowledging Pete during his security rounds. Not because he knew the man's secret, but because he had learned to recognize that everyone deserves respect regardless of their apparent role or status. Pete would nod back with the same quiet dignity he had always maintained, secure in the knowledge that at least one person understood that the most important work often happens in the shadows. The campus remained safe, the students continued their studies, and Pete maintained his cover while protecting them all. Some heroes wear uniforms and receive recognition. Others wear the invisible badge of quiet service, asking for nothing more than the knowledge that their vigilance allows others to sleep peacefully through the night. Marcus graduated 3 years later, but he never forgot the lesson Pete had taught him about looking beyond appearances and respecting the hidden depths that exist in every person we encounter. The night guard's secret wasn't just about his true identity. It was about the dignity and purpose that can be found in any role when it's performed with genuine care for others. Years later, when Marcus became a teacher himself, he would tell his students about the importance of noticing the people around them, of recognizing that everyone has a story worth respecting, and that the most extraordinary people often hide their capabilities behind the most ordinary appearances. Pete continued his work at Riverside University, a guardian in the shadows, ensuring that future generations of students could pursue their dreams safely, never knowing how much they owed to the quiet man who watched over them through the night.